snow hammered the cabin roof like a warning from the sky the moment Maya Carter realized the storm had swallowed the entire mountain. Inside, the lights flickered, her breath rising in fragile clouds as she held her son closer, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. And just when she thought the night couldn't get any colder, she saw them, 25 silhouettes staggering out of the blizzard, leather jackets stiff with ice, faces pale and desperate, engines dead behind them like tombstones buried in snow. They weren't just bikers, they looked like men on the edge of vanishing. If you believe every story hides a lesson, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales. It helps more than you know. Maya wasn't the kind of woman anyone expected to survive alone in the mountains. A single mother, yes. A quiet cashier at the roadside market, yes. Someone who patched torn coats instead of buying new ones, who kept a tiny first aid kit in her purse because life taught her no one was coming to save her, yes. But she wasn't fragile. Life had burned the fragility out of her years ago. So when she saw those men shivering in the storm, instinct moved faster than fear. She opened the door. The cold rushed in like a living creature, crawling across the floor, stealing even the warmth of the fireplace. Her baby clung to her, wide-eyed, as the first biker stepped forward, a tall man with a scar across his cheek and snow packed into his beard. He looked like a fallen tree just barely still standing. Maya felt her heart skip. But then she saw his hands. They weren't clenched. They were trembling. She let them in. Inside the cabin, the air thickened with the smell of wet leather and frostbitten breath. The men sat wherever they could, boots thawing, jackets steaming. They didn't talk much, exhaustion had stripped them down to their most human selves. Maya moved quietly among them, handing out blankets that weren't meant for so many, pouring hot water into mugs that weren't meant to stretch this far, feeding 25 grown men with a pot of stew meant for one woman and a toddler. Yet something in the room softened. Maybe it was the way Maya's little boy, barely old enough to say full sentences, stared curiously at these giants who looked like they rode through storms and fought them with their bare hands. Or maybe it was how the men seemed almost afraid to touch anything, as if afraid to break the fragile peace she had given them. One man cried silently when Maya placed her own winter coat over his shoulders. Another held her son for a moment when she needed both hands to stir the fire, looking at the child like he'd forgotten innocence even existed until that moment. Hours passed. The storm screamed against the windows. But inside, a warmth grew that no fire could explain. By dawn, the cabin looked like a shelter built on grace. The bikers were alive, because of her. Maya watched them prepare to leave, expecting nothing, asking for nothing. She had helped because that was who she was. The tall man with the scar lingered a moment longer, looking at her with a confusion that men like him weren't used to feeling. As they rode away, Maya stood in the snow, her baby bundled against her chest, watching the 25 engines fade into the forest like ghosts that found a second chance. The silence that followed felt heavy. Almost too heavy. She went inside, not knowing the world had shifted beneath her feet. It happened 3 hours later. The ground trembled first, a low rumble that made the window panes quiver. Then came the sound, like thunder made of steel and fire. Maya opened the door and froze. The road, the field, the entire stretch of land outside her cabin was filling with motorcycles. 500. Then 800. Then more. They came like an iron river, headlights cutting through the morning, exhaust fumes curling into the sky. Their jackets carried the same emblem the 25 men wore, but these were different. Organized. United. And there were hundreds, no more. When they finally stopped, the forest fell silent under the weight of their presence. At the very front stood a man with silver hair, a carved stone face, and a presence that felt carved from thunder. He wasn't just a biker. He was a leader. All 1,500 Hell's Angels had come to her door. Maya clutched her son, heart hammering. For a moment she thought she'd done something wrong. That she'd broken some unspoken rule by helping the men the night before. But then the silver-haired man dismounted slowly, taking his time through the snow until he stood directly before her. His eyes weren't cold. They were wet. He told her, voice low, thick, that the 25 men she sheltered weren't just any riders. They were survivors of an accident deep in the storm. Search crews had been looking for them all night, assuming the worst. These men were brothers to all 1,500 bikers standing before her now. Warriors, fathers, sons, uncles, men who had survived only because she had opened her door. And no one had ever done that for them. The weight of his gratitude hung in the air like something sacred. Without words, he motioned behind him. 100 men stepped forward carrying boxes, bags, tools, firewood, food, spare heaters, blankets, winter tires, everything a single mother surviving winter in the mountains could ever need. They didn't ask permission. They just began working. Clearing snow. Fixing her roof. Reinforcing the cabin walls. Stocking her pantry to the brim. Some of the toughest men in the country were working like quiet servants, for her. Maya felt her knees weaken. Not from fear. From the overwhelming realization that kindness, once given freely, sometimes returns like a rising tide. The silver-haired leader looked at her son, then back at her, and nodded with a kind of respect she'd never seen aimed her way. She didn't know it, but in that moment, the entire biker brotherhood silently adopted her and her child as their own. The sun climbed slowly over the trees as the men continued their work, breath steaming in the cold air, leather jackets creaking with each movement. It didn't feel like repayment. It felt like a vow. And when they finally mounted their bikes again, 1,500 engines roaring as one, the sound didn't shake the earth. It lifted her. If this story touched something in your heart, please like, comment, and share it. These stories survive because you feel them. Before the engines faded into the winter forest, the leader turned once more and gave Maya a final nod. She didn't need to understand its meaning, she felt it. Some connections don't need words. Comment below. What part of Maya's story stayed with you the most? And as the snow settled around her cabin again, Maya understood something quietly, profoundly true. Sometimes the world gives back in ways you never see coming, especially to those who give without expecting anything in return.